Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Panos Moumtzis. I'm here in Geneva with the Humanitarian Reform Senior Transformative Agenda team. I'd like to say a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us in today's webinar, where we're going to focus about information management. The key question we're going to be looking at is how information managing is or can be guiding strategic analysis. How is information management informing, supporting operations, decision-making, direction, vision, and in terms of how to go forward. But before I introduce the topic here and say a few more words and the speakers, I'd like to say, first of all, make a couple of points on the WebEx platform that we all have in front of us. So the first thing I want to ask you all to remain mute throughout the entire webinar, so please make sure you're muted. The second thing I want to highlight is that on the top right-hand side of your screen, you see there are 4 buttons. The second one says chat. So I want to encourage all of you throughout the webinar to really go into the chat box, and of course feel free to share reflections, so to talk with each other, because there is also a richness of information and the communication to be able to share good practices and experiences with all the participants who are on this webinar. To the right of the chat box, the third button to the right, there is a Q&A button. And I really want to encourage you from this very moment and throughout the webinar to send us questions, that I will be taking to our speakers as the webinar is progressing. In fact, during the first 30 minutes of the webinar, I will be asking a couple of questions to each of our 2 speakers, panelists, just to introduce the topic and shed some light into their perspectives and reflection and their own experience. During the second 30 minutes of the webinar, I will be bringing your questions, which could be to your specific context, challenges, issues, and we'll be asking the questions to the panelists to ask their views, their opinion in terms of how you could hopefully take forward the information management in the best possible way in your own operation wherever you are. I want to highlight that the webinar also is lively broadcasted through YouTube. So if you have a problem listening to this, you will see a link on your screen, in the middle of the screen on the right, where you can just click into. And if you are listening from a deep field location, then you will have definitely a much better sound quality. If you have technical problems with the sound, definitely write to us and we'll intervene to see how to sort it out and help you where you are. I'd like also to let you all know that this webinar is recorded and will be available online. If there's any of your colleagues, our colleagues who would like to listen to it later, then will be available online. I also want to point out that to the right-hand side of your screen, there is a polling that has opened a few minutes ago. It's basically a few questions, just trying for us to understand who's online and where you're listening from us for. So please take a minute to just give us your answers to the polling questions. Now, back to our topic, back to information management. I think we all agree that information management is central to the humanitarian response. It really helps decision making, it helps us to identify the needs, to prioritize the actions. It is the evidence that we all need when we put together a plan, and also to be able to take the right decisions, to make the right choices in terms of the response. I think we've all seen in operations where we have strong information and strong analysis, and what a difference it brings, not only in the response, but it brings a credibility to the entire operation. It helps in our relations with our donors, really to help to get further support for the operation. At the same time, many of us who have worked, and all of you who are working in difficult places, we all see the difficulty of getting information when there is limited access, when we work on insecure security environments. Sometimes there is competitiveness that makes us all keep the information. So I think that the information is really quite central in terms of our response, but also I think when we talk about information management, it is not just about numbers and the statistics. It's about the analysis and how we bring it together in a way that helps with decision making. And this is really what we want to focus on this webinar of today's discussion. It's not about the technical, although technology has really done great, has really progressed significantly over the years to be able to do better what we try to do, but how does leadership, whether it's a humanitarian coordinator or the HCT or the clusters or the intertrusters, how at all levels we help to guide, to make sure that the information guides us, supports us to take these decisions. Now, to answer to these questions, I'm delighted to welcome two distinguished speakers that we have with us on this webinar who are joining us live. So we have Kevin Kennedy. Kevin is the Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for the Syria situation. He's based in Amman, and actually he's joining us for this conversation from New York, where he's on mission. I'd like also to introduce and welcome Mathieu Rouquette, who is the representative for the Syria International NGO Regional Forum, SIRF. Mathieu has also a second hat, and he's the co-chair for the Syria Information Management and Assessments Working Group, SIMAWG, a specially created body, in particular in order to support the information management and bring the results that we see on the ground. I have to say that Syria was one of the operations that we're looking today. Syria is quite unique, of course, in its complexity, but at the same time, it's an operation where the ingredients, the steps, the elements that the colleagues have used in the Syria operation can definitely be taken out to other operations, and I hope you will all find it useful and practical to apply it to wherever you are and wherever you are listening from. So, Kevin, I'd like to come to you with the first question and really ask you if you could tell us in a few words how the information management in the Syria operation helped decision-making at the senior level in order really to support a more effective response, a more credible and evidence-based response to the operations on the ground. So, Kevin, over to you.
Good afternoon, Panos and colleagues. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Information in this crisis, Panos, has played really a critical role, and it's actually been the bridge, the means upon which we have built the entire coordination structure. Taking a step back, about until 18 months ago, the Syria response was, very busy, active, huge operation. But frankly, in many different pieces. We had the inside Syria operation, where we still have over 200 international staff on the ground. Plus, we had operations from 4 neighboring countries, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey. And essentially, there was very little contact among these 5 different strands, if you will. Very little contact. Essentially 5 silos operating, doing the best they could, but no coordination, obviously ripe for duplication, overlap, misunderstanding, etc. So when we created this whole Syria construct, the idea was to bring these 5 different elements together in a much more effective response. And to do that, we need information, shared information, common data sets, etc. It's been a long process. I think we've made substantial headway. We still have a ways to go, but it's made a difference. I think the crowning achievement, if you will, was the Humanitarian Needs Overview produced late last fall. And really, for the first time in the operation, we had a good picture, I think, of what the needs are, where the needs are, and where we need to focus our energy and our resources. We really did not have this before. A lot of it was done in the field, close to 1,500 interviews with people throughout all Syria, focus groups on protection, brought in many different data sets to try to, square them away and come up with a common set of the numbers, understanding, which we did. It is intense work. Obviously, lots of different opinions, lots of different ideas, and people often see things from where they are located without actually seeing the country as a whole. But I would say we've come a long way. But the question you raise is, I think, an essential one. Is all this effort worth it? I mean, do we get something out of the information we receive? I would say yes. I'm sure it can be better utilized, but I would say yes. I would offer as an example of something just came up in the last 2 weeks, is the operations of NGOs, Syrian NGOs, inside the so-called besieged cities. We knew this was happening, we heard about it, but we really didn't have it. And as people have been more forthcoming with information, and it's taken a while, we've come to learn there's several, actually 3 dozen different NGOs operating inside besieged cities by various means, and which gives a much better picture. And as we try to focus on access, which is really our key movement effort at the moment, it's made a big difference, I think, and informs our programming and what we do. So and answer your question, the information is critical to the response, and I think does inform operational decisions more so now than in the past. Over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. It was nice to hear your concrete example of access, which is really crucial to be able to help people in hard-to-reach areas or wherever they are. That's really a good concrete example on what you've done. I'd like to take us now to Amman, where Mathieu is there. Mathieu, I would like to ask you, in this Syria operation, I mean, Kevin talked about the different hubs, different locations, a complex situation where a large number, hundreds of NGOs most probably, and humanitarian actors work in different locations with a common objective to help people who are in desperate need. So can I ask you, how did you manage to bring together all these different actors in order to collaborate, to provide the information that then to provide analysis that helps the decision making and supports the humanitarian operation in the best possible way? This is quite a colossal task. Mathieu.
Thank you, Panos, and thank you all for joining this webinar today. Well, to answer this question, I think it's important to bring a bit of a historical perspective to really fully understand the complexity of this response and the daunting challenges around information management in order to appreciate really what the progress we've accomplished so far. As Kevin mentioned, in the first few years of the crisis, given the intransigent restrictions imposed by the authorities in Damascus to guarantee free and direct access to people in need, the response was geographically fragmented, mostly based on areas of control. So with massive humanitarian and protection needs increasing in opposition areas, NGOs took a very Kushnerian decision to deliver assistance cross-border, while the UN was essentially operating from government-controlled areas with sporadic access across conflict lines. And this fragmented response was very much delivered in silos with little to no sharing of information between the cross-border and Damascus operations. And that fragmentation was actually further nurtured by the tropisms inherent to the physical location of these modalities. So a rift started to grow between humanitarian actors and mistrust started to prevail. Fragmented response meant having a fragmented IM, incomparable data sets, different norms, different tools and methodologies. We were speaking a different language. So in short, from the perspective of the transformative agenda, and just from a system perspective, I'm not talking about the quality of the response, but just from that perspective, our response was substandard. So 2014 really came as a game changer, and the Security Council Resolution 2165 was the game changer, because it really enabled the UN to start its own cross-border operation, and it enabled the system to see Syria as a whole. That's why we refer to this approach as the whole of Syria. So it took another 8 months, for this new and unique coordination architecture to take shape, and the result is quite staggering. And it's important for our listeners to visualize that, to understand how complex this is, because we basically have 3 HCTs. 3 intersector working groups, or intercluster working groups. And above that, we have a layer of meta-coordination, if you will, with the whole of Syria intersector and with the whole of Syria HCT, which is called the strategic steering group. And that layer basically interacts with each of these hubs under an approach that's enshrined in complementarity and subsidiarity. So it's been quite difficult and time-consuming to map areas of responsibilities and define the parameters of that subsidiarity. It's very multidimensional. It's a multiverse of analysis and decision-making. But despite the existential questioning, progress was made steadily from the get-go. A collective momentum, a joint collective momentum, UN, NGO colleagues, international NGOs, Syrian NGOs, all modalities combined began to take shape. Even before we figured out this coordination architecture, the first whole of Syria HRP was released. And that's 6 months after the resolution, right? We are talking December 2014. And really here I must commend Kevin's leadership, who's been essential and instrumental in putting these pieces together. The SIMAWG that I now co-chair has been very much the engine room of the whole of Syria construct. It is the main driver of the whole of Syria assessment, of the HNO, that undoubtedly, and despite the limitations that are inherent to the methodology that we had to use and the access constraint that we were facing, is presumably and undoubtedly the best needs overview we ever had in Syria. And more collective initiatives are currently underway. As part of our HNO process for next year, we're compiling a flurry of data collection and assessment initiatives undertaken by myriad of partners into one central registry, so that we're able finally to speak with one language. We're also now looking downstream into improved monitoring of our responses in besieged areas to better inform the operation and the advocacy of our Damascus-based colleagues, and to help inform decision-making in other coordination bodies as well. There's another aspect that I want to touch on today also, because we've been speaking of information management in terms of response, and that's the most obvious, critical part. But it's important also to understand how the system, and if the system is fit to act on this information. And I think we're still struggling a bit with this multidimensional coordination architecture, recognizing that all of those coordination bodies are linked with one another. And unfortunately, we're still struggling to get an appropriate sequencing of our meetings, to design common agendas, to share minutes appropriately. It sounds like very mundane, but actually this information flow is critical to put everyone on the same page. And that's an easy fix, so we need to work on that. In terms of bringing people together, I think the role of SIRF as a platform of NGOs has been essential. I mean, SIRF was instrumental in the definition, in the articulation of that architecture. And with my position as the key observer, member, or co-chair of those coordination bodies, the 50+ members of SIRF benefit from a permanent representation and information sharing platform. It's also an important referral and accountability mechanism that links all those bodies together. SIRF also works very closely with ICRC, with MSF, with the other NGO coordination structures in the region, and with the NGO consortium in the region. My host agency, Mercy Corps, for example, is now dedicating a position to support the NGOs operating cross-border from Iraq. So we're also working hard to streamline this, to enhance the collective engagement of NGOs and our information sharing. But if I may, Panos, because as a representative of the transformative agenda, I think it's important we recognize the role of NGOs in a much stronger, much more ambitious fashion. The TA recognized the role of NGOs and their representation in the humanitarian architecture. But I think it's time we recognize further and institutionalize the role of NGO fora. We have huge potential to assemble and to channel information. We can be a critical actor in information management to support the humanitarian operation. But without a clear mandate from the ASC, without a clear set of expectations, we are a poorly tapped, unevenly tapped resource. And finally, my last point, and I know I'm using too much time, and that's perhaps the biggest question mark, is how we bring partners that have escaped our gravitational pull. You know, there are hundreds of millions of dollars of assistance being channeled through Gulf charities and NGOs that we're struggling to integrate in our mapping and our analysis. That will be a key challenge for our 2017 HRP. Over to you, Panos.
Thank you, Mathieu. You really made a number of very, very important points. It's wonderful to hear that the information management is the engine room of the operation, and really this is what we want to see more and more in operations around the world, where information management guides, informs, enlightens decision making, enlightens the ability to move closer towards the affected people. I mean, we always think information management to report to the donors or to report to our own organization, but really to bring it as an engine to the operational room. That's really great to hear. Also, very much the role of the NGOs and the coordination and the role that SIRF has played to bring it together. It's really invaluable because it helps indeed bring everybody, first of all, informed, but also moving with the right way to help the operation. I want to welcome many more colleagues who have joined us since we started, and just highlight to everybody that there is a Q&A box on the top right-hand side of your screen. And as our speakers speak, please, I welcome you to send us questions that are related to your operation, that you would like me to take them forward in about 10-15 minutes once we go into the Q&A session with our speakers. I'd like to move now back to Kevin. And Kevin, I mean, we have many colleagues listening from around the world, and the question we have got in advance is, what are the ingredients that you would say, what are the elements that make an information information management systems work? What worked in Syria, but many of these ingredients may also be applicable to many of the colleagues who are listening around the world. Kevin.
Thank you, Panos. I think, first of all, of course, you have to invest in the information management infrastructure. And you need the people, and you need to qualify people, as well as you need the technical support items. There's some resistance to this because, again, it's sort of administrative overhead cost, and people wonder if it's too heavy or not necessary. But you need all organizations, and go back to Mathieu's point in this operation, you need all organizations, whether it be UN, NGO, national, international, Red Cross, Red Crescent, they need you represented in the information collection, dissemination, and analysis. I think it's very important, and you have to have the resources to do this. And I would say also, too, which really makes a difference, and it is the backbone of the operation, this whole information process and information protocols and security protocols and trying to determine what bits of information are relevant to the operation. This has the underlying effect of creating the relationships within a widely dispersed, geographically, sometimes philosophically operation, and bringing people together on a common platform. I think it's very, very important. It is a bit of a struggle, and we still work at it, but I think we've done a lot in terms of developing a consciousness that there are many assets, many capacities available to respond to the situation in Syria, and they're best used if they're talking to each other and simple coordination. I think this is where one has to begin.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to take us back to Mathieu. Mathieu, I'm going to ask you a blunt question. Basically, what you're saying, you've made progress, but there's still work to be done on the information management. So the question really, when you look at the Syria operation, is has the data collection, has the analysis, has the information management really led to a better program efficiency in the whole of Syria response? And that's really the angle, I think, that many operations around the world are interested to see the impact, the examples. Mathieu, over to you.
Thank you, Panos. I think the answer is yes. But I think we need to deconstruct that answer to fully get into the nuances and the caveats that it entails. So let me take you back to February 2016. For the first time, OCHA and the SIMAWG are able to produce an intersector map of gap analysis. And we're 5 years into the crisis. So any sane member, any sane listener today might ask, I mean, wait a second, guys. I mean, it took you 5 years to do that. It took you 3 years under a continued L3 activation to produce that. Fair question, right? But, you know, for all of us involved, it was a successful outcome of a major undertaking. It was a pretty huge achievement. So as I mentioned earlier, the whole of Syria approach and its collective vision did produce some significant achievements. The success of the HNO was critical to design a more refined, sharper sector and cluster strategies, and thusly a better HRP. Look at the protection sector, for example. When we ask, and we can perhaps have you know, people answering in the chat, what is the main protection concern for Syrians today? I mean, feel free to answer. The first thing that usually comes to mind are barrel bombs, right? But what came out of the protection sector overview was actually that the lack of civil documentation was one of the key concerns for Syrians. That really enabled to shift the cluster strategy and the advocacy that goes with that. So very important piece. So, you know, at the macro level, despite the limitations of the methodology and that are inherent to the, you know, to the context we work in, our program efficiency in the whole of Syria response did improve. We don't really have metrics to measure that, right? But I am convinced that it did. And if you look at if you analyze that through the negative, let's look at our program efficiency, where the paucity of data prevents us from having a good picture of the needs on the ground. And I'm referring to IC-styled areas. 2.6 million people, a few NGOs that try to continue to provide some level of assistance, but mostly we don't really have eyes and ears. And here, it is a major failure of the humanitarian community. So, I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that some of these achievements, most of these achievements I've been talking about are upstream, you know, humanitarian program cycle related, and they're like, you know, upstream milestones, if you will. So the question is really, have we as a community improved the response downstream? Has IM really made a difference in the lives of Syrians in need? And as we've discussed earlier, you know, information sharing is a critical and defining pillar of the whole of Syria. It conditions everything, a better understanding of needs, of gaps, eventually a better understanding of the response. After all, it's the raison d'etre of the whole of Syria. And that's where we've got mixed results. Mixed results because we're not necessarily still where we should be. We still lack a dynamic, downstream-looking, cross-sectoral IM that informs operational decision-making and coordination. But with the various degrees of separation between decision makers and right holders, the multiple layers of aggregation that data needs to go through means that the system loses in agility. Remember, we're talking about a multidimensional, multiverse coordination architecture. So we do need to put more emphasis and more work on consistency, on channeling, on improving and maximizing the information flow. But when you consider where we started from, the progress we've made, we're really on the right track. We're getting there. And I believe we've done the hard spot. I mean, it's really difficult to climb Everest. But if you start your ascent from the bottom of the Mariana Trench, like 10,000 meters below sea level, when you reach the surface, it's actually a major achievement, right? And we had major obstacles to face. As Kevin pointed out, humanitarian partners had very legitimate security concerns around information sharing. There is a very high degree of sensitivity here. You know, when your staff, your facilities, beneficiaries get directly targeted in attacks, I mean, we can only understand their reluctance to share information. So we can, you know, go around and mention the transformative agenda, information sharing is good, you know, cluster reference modules. But at the end of the day, you know, your medical workers are getting bombed day in, day out. So, no, duty of care, principle of precaution. I'm not going to share that information. So you see where we had to start from, not just encouraging people to share, but convincing them it was safe to do so. We really had to build that trust. And here, I think it's important to highlight and commend the work that OCHA, that my NGO and UN whole of Syria sector leads, and people like IMAP, with whom we work to ensure we had appropriate information flows, anonymization frameworks, data sharing protocols to ensure due diligence in the application of our duty of care. And it took a while to get there, but most partners, most sectors now share their data at the highest level of granularity. And that's the only possible way the whole of Syria can deliver an added value in terms of gap analysis, in terms of better informed decision making, and better operational coordination. But that was a catch-22, right? A critical catch-22. For many in the field, the whole of Syria appeared as this meta coordination structure, appeared as a distraction. So we first had to demonstrate the added value of the whole of Syria. Like, why should I share? What's in it for me? What are you going to do with that information? What is it used for? To which we had to answer, well, I can't really demonstrate the added value if you don't share the information with me. I need to analyze that. So our role was now to become ambassadors for the whole of Syria, challenge the status quo, and really explain and contextualize why the system needed that information to function and deliver. And we're now at a defining point. I think we're able to deliver on that promise. We're able to deliver on that vision. At agency level, the answer to your question, Panos, is a definite yes. Using new technologies, data collection analysis, information management tools lead to better program efficiency in the response. I mean, many of the agencies I represent are now writing the book on remote management, on data collection, and so forth, using like real-time data, data capture, for example. And at the sector level, some sectors have made incredible progress and are definitely improving the response. Look at the health sector, for example. I mean, safe to say that their IM tools save lives. The early warning, alert, and response system, for example, which was put in place to monitor outbreaks of diseases, to raise alerts, investigate, and respond. When we had alerts of acute watery diarrhea last year, when a cholera outbreak was reported in Iraq, health partners were actually able to respond with hygiene promotion messaging, prepositioning of cholera kits, and no outbreak occurred. So obviously, it's hard to prove a negative, right? But I do believe that it was essential in the quality of the response. So now we need to take that to the next level, and that's the next step, right? We do it at agency level, we do it at sector level. Now let's use that at the intersector level and strategic decision-making level. We do need to be focusing on that and do a lot more of that. But also, I also want to touch on the role of donors because they have a huge role to play in that. And I regret to see that the SIMAWG is not attracting as many donors as it used to, because it is a critical forum to engage and ensure donor funding supports integrated and comprehensive initiatives. There's a highly calorific diffusion of efforts that should be better streamlined. And I really believe that in other responses around the world, the role of those IM working groups is critical and essential to standardize tools, to speak the same language, and to really support the operation in delivering the best humanitarian response possible. Over to you, Panos.
Thanks, Mathieu. It's good to see the progress, but obviously you're also putting forward still the areas to improve and to be able to move forward. It's 34 minutes past the hour, and I'm going to be taking actually questions that you have sent for Kevin and Mathieu. I also want to encourage listeners that you can still send questions now as we're going through, which through the Q&A box. Send your question there, it comes to me, and then I take them to our speakers. I'll take them over the next 25 minutes or so. So, Kevin, the first question is to you, and it's really from a colleague who said, I am working in an operation where there is really chaos, there is havoc. It's an emergency, we haven't really agreed on tools, we haven't agreed on information management. Clearly there is many different priorities. And that colleague who said the question says, I'm working on information management. I am feeling really like I'm being pulled in all directions. There's information demanded by donors, demanded by our regional office, by my headquarters, by the cluster coordinators, by the senior leadership in the country, then the technical team. It's really pulling it in all directions. So who is driving information management process? How does it happen? at the senior leadership, and what's the role you see as an HC or HCT to be able to provide some guidance also through the HCT or through the intercluster at the appropriate level to be able to prioritize what comes first and what's really more important, bearing in mind that the most important reason we're there is to help the people in need. Kevin.
Well, thanks, Panos. So I feel the questioners of pain, but I think we've all been through that or are going through that. I think a couple of things that would need to be done. From the leadership, that is, I think the big agencies, the big NGOs, the humanitarian coordinator, if you will, they have to set the priorities of what's important. And obviously many things are important in these operations, but some things have to be more important than others. For instance, at the moment, I would say in our operation, the whole issue of access to besieged and hard to reach areas and the exact nature of the problems we encounter there, have to excuse the siren in the background. This is New York. We're focusing on the besieged and the hard to reach areas and understanding what the problems are in each of those individual locations. So as we try to work with the government, with other people to gain access, this is important. And that drives a lot of our information efforts. I think second is the importance of the cluster leadership. They understand best the technical requirements of a particular sector, food items or non-food items. They need to set the parameters of what they see as important information. Thirdly, I think it's also good to establish what you're going to deliver and widely advertise that. We had the same challenge some months back in whole Syria. Many different reports, many complaints from different quarters that we don't know what you're doing, what reports are coming out, when they're coming out, what they're going to cover, etc. And we sat down and came up with a menu of reports that are standardized and always on offer on a regular basis, and also reports we can do on a custom basis as well too, if time and resources permit. And we widely distribute this to donors, member states, etc. And that slowed down a bit, if you will, a lot of these random requests coming over the transfer of information. And lastly, I mentioned this in the previous webinar, the demands for information get to be irksome after a while from all different directions. And I always feel for, say, the OCHA staff who have to reach out to many different sectors and organizations to compile information on a broad range of topics. But when you're dealing in a crisis where there's a lot of political attention on it, and Syria is certainly that, where it's discussed in the formally briefed to the Council every month and often every week, member states from all sides of the aisle with great interest, there is this great demand. I think, while it's burdensome, I think it's really important to provide it and provide it accurately in order to inform those kinds of decisions and also to shape the picture about this particular emergency. And on this score, I would add, with the ongoing peace talks in Geneva, certainly our inputs on humanitarian information, besieged, hard to reach, issues we face in access, etc., in our working environment, are of great interest to all those people in the peace talks, and it's our duty to provide that in a timely and also very correct way too. So I think this is where one has to head. Back to you.
Thanks, thanks, Kevin. Matthew, there is a caller who really responded to your catch-22 comments, and basically the question that I received says, actually, you're not the only one with the catch-22. We share the same frustration in our operation. And this is about the information sharing, where you've said that what the catch-22 is, I'm not going to share with you any information because you're not useful to me. At the same time, I'm not going to be useful to you because you're not sharing with me. So really, I mean, how this to make it work where there is a need for confidence on all sides. So the caller is sending the question saying, to resolve the catch-22, do you think that if we have like a standardized data, do you think if we don't ask for too much upfront to build step by step? What was your experience on the Syria context, Matthew?
Thanks, Panos. Well, I think the most important thing is for any upstream related information sharing requirement not to be a distraction, not to be perceived as a distraction, and not to be an actual distraction. So I think the job of the person asking for that information is to contextualize why is it going to be used for. And that, for me, is just minimum courtesy, but also one of the key success factors of making this happen, right? If you do explain, why you need the information, what is it going to be used for, and how it's going to make the response better, chances are you will have a much better shot at securing that information. It has to leave the minimal footprint possible in terms of bandwidth, meaning that if you do ask information, as much as possible, tap into what's already existing. It's much easier for someone to CC someone else than to create a whole new spreadsheet, with pretty much similar information that this person has been sending. So I think it's a dialogue. There's a bit of a sales pitch, that needs to happen here. But it's critical for everybody to feel involved in the process, especially in such a difficult and complex and remote operations such as Syria. I think we've managed to break that, to crack that nut, if you will, in the Syria response. And again, it goes back to how successful those whole Syria sector leads have been in challenging the status quo and really pushing to get additional granularity and increased granularity in the information they got. But I also believe that at the end of the day, it goes back to what we all want: make a difference in the field. And I really want to also salute our Syrian colleagues on the ground, who've also been very adamant about their willingness to share and to learn, to cross-fertilize, and to be part of that effort. Nothing would have been possible without them. And they've, at times, actually shown NGOs the right way of doing things. So it's a very I think humbling experience to see how much of the leadership role the Syrian NGOs have played in this response and in the overall information sharing. Over to you, Panos.
Thanks, Mathieu, and thanks for raising the question and the issue and the vital role of the Syrian NGOs. Actually, I have a question related to that I'd like to take to Kevin. And Kevin, one of the callers sent a question saying, how did you were able to use information management in reaching communities, and in particular the role of the national actors on this within the Syrian context? So that's a question, of course, of the accountability to affected people linked with information management and ensuring this relation of dignity and respect. So Kevin, what's your thoughts?
No, Panos, thanks for the question. I think it's a very good question, and maybe reinforcing Mathieu's point, the role of national NGOs in this operation, at least in my experience, has been quite extraordinary and much different than the past, where often national NGOs are, I think, treated in a somewhat patronizing fashion and not provide any resources, not provide any kind of training, particularly for people who are new to humanitarian work. We made a concerted effort in this operation. To begin with, our humanitarian pooled funds largely fund national NGOs by like 75–80%. So they do receive the resources with which to work. They're the ones also on the ground with the connections, in particular those working in areas not controlled by the government, which are the areas, not all of them, but the ones that receive most of the artillery fire and aerial bombardments. They're on the ground working, and we rely on them in a critical way to inform us as to the situation in various locations within Syria. And that is really our link to the people on the ground. As Mathieu said, and this is important, their views, their impressions, their concerns are fully reflected in our leadership body, the Strategic Steering Group, which includes national NGOs working on all sides of the conflict. They're full members and very valuable members of our leadership crew because they have insights that we as non-Syrians, outsiders who don't work all the time inside the country, we just don't have access to. So it's very important to bring them on And the same way with the whole information processing, Mathieu touched on this. It really is, it's important to have all hands on deck when it comes to information management. And when it comes to reporting, it's also, if I could say, it's also a duty. It's a responsibility, I think, of a professional humanitarian worker to provide information to other bodies, other groups that are trying to put together an operation and also inform the political process. It's more than, it's not an elective, it's something one should do automatically as part for the general good of the operation. Over to you.
Thanks, thanks, Kevin. Really crucial, this contact with communities and impact and role of the national NGOs. I'm actually going to take us to Mathieu now. And Mathieu, there is one caller who sent a message. She said, I'm working on information management, and I very much welcome this discussion, these examples on information management analysis influencing the operations room, as Mathieu put it. In my operation, the operation where I'm working, information management is often about reporting, not about information management influencing decision-making. And that's refreshing, hearing about information management actually being at the core of the operations room. So, Mathieu, do you want to say a little bit more about that? Really, is information management about reporting? Is this really what we're doing in many operations, and how to change it really to make it the operations room, to make it critical, useful for the program and the services we're offering to support to the affected people? Mathieu.
Thanks, Panos. I think it's a great question because it relates to the point I was trying to make earlier. Yes, I think reporting for the sake of reporting, we've all seen that, and for many, it's being perceived, or it is, you know, a distraction to their daily jobs. And that's really counterproductive, because I don't think it's beneficial for the morale of the staff involved. I don't think it's beneficial for the response, and perhaps, you know, the only interest is that it feeds the beast. Nevertheless, it is an essential part of reporting. I think people in HQs need to be able to access that information. Kevin this morning in the first webinar did use the example of the report to the Secretary General to the Security Council. That is an essential piece of documentation that we use for advocacy purposes, and reporting into that document is absolutely crucial. And it is, you know, again, as Kevin just mentioned, a real responsibility and accountability. So this needs to happen. But it needs to happen in a framework, in a system that doesn't distract field coordinators from the field work. And it's probably a question of resourcing or the division of labor to ensure that those tasks take the minimum bandwidth from people who have eyes on the field. I believe there are ways to do that. And I think that layer of coordination that we have in the whole of Syria, with our whole of Syria sector leads, we have this facilitation, consolidation, contextualization role is absolutely essential. Because they provide that buffer between the field and the reporting hunger of you know, of the people higher up, but which is legitimate and needs to be taken into account and needs to happen, but in a format that shouldn't distract people from the operation. Over to you.
Great, thanks a lot, Mathieu. Kevin, there's a question about the politicization of the humanitarian response, working in an environment where the world is a global village. Anything we say, anything we write, it goes out immediately, yet there are some hard truths and facts that need to be told, whether we're talking about famine, about security, or about the people that are on the ground with sensitive protection questions. How do you balance that in an operation where you're constantly asked for information? Some of it may be sensitive. At the same time, you want to be true to addressing the issue as need be within a very transparent world we're living with. I also want to point out to everybody that we have a few more minutes to go to the end of the webinar, and answering poll has just opened. We basically, as you're listening to the next few minutes, we want to make sure that we hear your view on this webinar and future webinars as we're going through. So Kevin, back to the question, information management and politicization. What are your thoughts?
It's a very good question as well, Panos, and something that we wrestle with all the time, including our staff on the ground inside Syria are subject to various pressures that makes them sometimes have to walk a very fine line, which we fully appreciate. I think we have one advantage, if you will, in the humanitarian world, if I can put it that way, is that we can more easily speak the truth if we maintain our objectivity, our impartiality, our humanity, and establish that record where we're consistent and not seen as juggling or skewing information to serve any particular purpose. I think we have to be straight up and as honest as possible. Some things might have to be said privately, not publicly. Something may have to be put occasionally in more diplomatic language to achieve a larger objective. We've been faced with this time to time in the Syria response. But by and large, we try to be straight up, and I think build the kind of credibility that whatever party is interested in our response, you know, they can't attack us for not being having integrity in the way we operate. The politicization issue comes up frequently. I think it's certainly common knowledge. It's in the press every day. The peace talks in Geneva, there's a humanitarian task force as part of that effort, which does focus on humanitarian issues. Member states are in this group. There's 25 member states as part of this international Syria support group that work on this business. And they have a keen interest, and they probably have their own political agendas when it comes to assistance and where it's delivered, how it's delivered, who delivers it to. But I think it's unavoidable, and we try to be, again, straight up. We provide what we think are the problems, what are the concerns, ideas how to address them in a way that no one should take offense from, we hope. Lastly, and you made the point, the illusion, and it goes all the information sharing and security concerns, which are very legitimate on the part of some of our partners. I think in this day and age that, you know, if somebody wants to find out what you're saying by email or whatever, they're going to find out. So there's very little real secrets in this operation from those who are determined to find out. I think that keep that in mind. Over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. I have a question that actually just arrived. The question says, how can the humanitarian coordinator or the HCT be more engaged and encourage agency heads to really contribute more in the information management? And the caller says that unfortunately information management is not always a priority for agencies, and that's also related to the resources that are put on this. So how this, of course, the resources are affected by the quality of the information, yet if we don't invest in it, we cannot get the information that can help us to get better resources. So we're back into a different type of catch-22. Mathieu, what are your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Panos. Well, I think I'm going to give you the same answer that Kevin gave you earlier. It is a responsibility of the cluster lead agency. IM is one of the 6 key, core function of a cluster. So I do believe that you can hold your cluster lead agency accountable to better linking up with its IM capacity and dedicating the necessary resources to get it right. So, I mean, that's the way I see it. And then, I mean, the role of bodies like the SIMAWG is absolutely essential in a response. And I do encourage listeners who don't necessarily have this type of body in their responses to consider or start thinking about options, because I do believe that's where, you know, that's the right forum for technical people, but also to support the intercluster and to support the HCTs in their analysis. So it's an essential piece. I mean, we're seeing today that information management is not only falling within the remit of OCHA. A lot of obviously other UN agencies, but NGOs and specialized organizations are putting a lot on the table. Donors are also very interested in that and fund a lot of initiatives. I think it's time we recognized that it can't be taken in isolation, that we need a home for that conversation, and we need to recognize in a much more systemic way, if you will, the crucial role that IM plays in the definition of a strategy and a definition of an operation.
Thanks,
over to you,
thanks, Matthew. I'm going actually to take the last question, and while I'm asking the last question, I want to encourage colleagues to provide, to spend a minute on the polling that is open to get your views, your thoughts on this webinar. Kevin, a question we received, the caller says, are we really using in information management all possible tools, all possible technologies, or possible means to be able, in a world where these days with the mobile phone, with many systems, with the fact that even affected people, IDPs, refugees, everybody has a quick way of communication. Are we doing everything we can in our humanitarian world's information management from a technology point of view to be able to advance, including social media, to bring out the best that we can? Kevin, what do you think?
Thank you, Panos. I'm not a techno person myself, but clearly the advances in how to acquire and to share information have had a huge impact on our operation. I think all operations worldwide. I mentioned earlier this morning, you know, if you looked at reporting, say, 15 or 20 years ago from a humanitarian emergency, sort of a random sit-rep, no necessarily prescribed format, the information was not joined up, it was not comprehensive or across all sectors. We've come a long, long way. And specialized organizations like REACH and IMAP have played a big role in this business too. People understand technology and how to use it and how to bring it together. So we use social media, we monitor social media, we use GIS systems, we produce maps. You know, a map that you could never produce 10 years ago, now it's a routine thing. And it's also, by the way, raised the bar of expectations. Because people, donors in particular, member states, the Security Council, the political arms of the UN, I can speak for them, they expect some very refined and professional inputs, not some, you know, elementary school level product. No, it's something very slick and sophisticated. It also helps make your case as well, too. So I think we are using it. I don't know if we're using it to the max extent possible. I suspect all these things develop in time, and certainly we've seen that in this operation as we become more sophisticated in our approach and use more different assets. So I think we're again heading in the right direction on this business as well too. Let me go back just one brief comment, Panos, on Matthew's earlier intervention. You know, I think there's a tendency, it goes in the UN certainly, and also in the NGO world, not just Syria, to sort of withhold information. It's not only the business of the energy that you need to provide it, and write reports and inputs, etc., but also organizations are often reluctant, obviously, to show that a program is not being all they hoped it to be, or there are problems here or there. I think we do ourselves a disservice by not being very clear and transparent about our successes and our failures. All these emergencies, certainly Syria, are conducted in a war zone, which is the central fact affecting all the operations, programs, the staff, etc. And by definition, operations in a war zone are very, very difficult, and simple things become very difficult. So I think we have to be honest with ourselves and honest with our partners in the humanitarian effort, as well as donors and member states. Hey, this is what we're doing. This is where it hasn't been done well, or for this or that reason, and go forward. People respect that. No one expects perfection, and people, when they do find things out, which eventually they do, they're concerned if they see that things were hidden from them or deliberately downplayed so as not to bring out the picture. So I think this is important. Back to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Fully agree on the importance, indeed, being explicit, being open about success, failures, and to tell the story as it is. Colleagues, I'm afraid we have come to the end of this webinar, the end of the 60 minutes discussion on information management. What I really take from this conversation is a very important point. Information management, it is not only about numbers and statistics. is not about tables and graphs. It is primarily providing the information, providing the data, the interpretation, the analysis that goes with it to help decision making, to influence the operations, to influence a way that we can better do what to do in the humanitarian field to make it more efficient, more effective, more accountable to the very people we are working for. I'd really like to thank, first of all, our speakers for sharing their reflections and really for the progress that has been done in the Syria operation. I want to thank Kevin Kennedy, the Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for Syria. I want to thank Mathieu Rouquette, the representative for the Syria International NGO Regional Forum, also the co-chair for the Syria Information Management and Assessment Working Group. I really want to warmly thank all of you who have followed us this afternoon. I was delighted to see colleagues from as far as Haiti, Panama, Salvador, but also Middle East, Africa, following this conversation. This webinar will be recorded and will be available if you want to have colleagues listen to it. Just from me, Panos, Moumtzis, and my colleagues want to wish you all a good day and say goodbye from here from Geneva. And really warm thanks to the speakers again.
Thank you, Panos.